Python has an important function called map, which is an example of what's called a higher order function, and we're going to take a look at it in this video. Before I do so, I want to tell you about another built-in function called range. It takes two integers, low and high, and it essentially gives you back a list of integers that goes from low up to high minus 1. So up to but not including that second input, high. And so it's a way of working with a range of integers. In order to actually see the list of integers that range gives us, we have to make the call within a call to a function called list, which is another built-in function. So for example, list range 3, 10 gives me the list of integers that starts at 3 and goes up to but not including 10. If all I did was type in range 3, 10, you can see I don't actually get the list. I get an expression that is essentially the same thing that I typed in. So you have to make the call from within a call to this list function if you want to actually see the list itself. If I say list range 20, 30, you can see we get the list of integers from 20 to 29. If we only give range a single number, it's going to assume that we want to start the range at 0 and go up to but not including the number that we give it. So for example, range 8 gives me the integers from 0 to 7. In Python, functions are considered to be first-class citizens of the language. That means that they're really just data, and they can be treated as any other type of data can be treated, like a string or an int. In particular, we can pass a function as an input to another function, and we can even write functions that return a function as a result. When a function takes another function as an input, it's known as a higher order function. And the higher order function that you saw in the reading and that we're going to talk about today is the map function. Map takes two inputs. It takes a function and it takes a sequence, either a string or a list, and it applies that function to each element of that sequence, and it gives us back the results. Now, as we saw with range, you can think of the result as being a list, and in many cases you can use it like you would use a list. But to actually see the list, you need to use map in conjunction with the list function. To see how map works, I've put three different functions in a Python file. There's one called triple that takes a value x and returns 3 times x. There's one called square. It takes a number x and returns the square of that number, so x times x. And then there's one called first char that takes a string s and returns the first character in that string. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to run this Python file so that I'll be able to access these functions. That brings me over here to the shell. And now what I can do is I can start using map in conjunction with those other functions. Now again, I'm going to do it from within list. So I'm saying I want map to apply the function triple to each element of this list of integers. And so do you see how it took each of these integers, passed it into triple, and gave us back the result? So when we pass in 0 to triple, we get 0. When we pass in 1 to triple, we get 3. When we pass in 2 to triple, we get 6, etc. So each value in the original list has been tripled by that triple function, and map gives us back the list of results. Now again, to see the list, we have to use the list function, but that's what map is essentially doing. Here's an alternative way of getting the same result. You can see I'm still passing in triple to map, but this time instead of passing in this concrete list, I'm using range to generate that list. And here, because I'm not asking to see what range gives me, I don't need to use range in conjunction with list. I can just use range. So range is going to give me essentially this list, and then I'm passing that in to map along with triple, and I get the same thing I got before. Okay, now let's try using map in conjunction with this square function that we talked about. So if I again give it range 6, you can see I'm getting the square of the integers from 0 up to 5. 0 squared is 0, 1 squared is 1, 2 squared is 4, 3 squared is 9, etc. And then let's try mapping first char to this list of strings. And notice how we're getting the first character of each string. We get the first character of the string hello, we get the first character of the string world, we get the first character of the string bye. And that's because map is mapping this first char function, which we saw up here, to each of the strings in that list, passing in each of the strings one at a time and getting back their first characters.